Alright. Changing camera angle for a big change in the channel. So, COPPA. That is essentially the reason why this video is so late and why there's a big change in this channel. Child Online Privacy Protection Act, for those of you who haven't heard before, essentially says that you can't collect data from kids under 13 online without parental consent, and it's got to be verifiable consent. And tracking cookies qualify as data that you can't collect under this law, and YouTube has been in violation of this for quite a while. And yeah, FTC decided to thwack them with a $170 million fine. And part of that settlement was that they can now go after content creators who don't mark their content appropriately, so YouTube can follow the rules, as it were. I'm not doing this for the ad revenue, so the loss in ad revenue doesn't really affect me that much. But if I mark this as for kids, which is the low-risk option, we lose comments. Subscribers don't get notified, if you can even subscribe to the channel. And it doesn't appear in YouTube search, and it doesn't, and the playlists don't work, and I think I already mentioned comments. It was as if this response from YouTube was custom tailored to nuke the ever-living daylights out of my channel. Well, okay, someone's going to call my response as if I'm a cockroach. Well, cockroaches can survive a nuclear holocaust, so cross my fingers and hope. Here's what I'm going to try, and I'd like your input on this. I could, one, quit. I don't want to do that. Two, I go on as I have been and mark this is not for kids. And, well, model making, I could see some stuffy bureaucrat saying, oh, that's for kids, he's mislabeling it, and decide to make an example of me. I don't want to pay a $42,000 fine per video. It's like $42,500 actually. This is going to be for me well in excess of $2 million. I don't want to do that. I'm sure you understand why. I'm a father. I have a family. I have mouths to feed. I don't have 2.1 plus million laying around. If I did, I have better uses of it. That's out. So this is the option I'm going to go with. And those who know me in real life are going to laugh, but I'm going to gear this channel towards kids. I'm going to nuke all my current content. This is going to be the only video I've got of old me moving forward, and I'm going to try this. But I'd like from all of you who've just bumped into this channel, if you think that this is a good response to COPPA, feel free to share. If you think that this is if this is relevant to your interests and you want to continue, again, the classic like, subscribe, share mix, or dance, whatever. But what I'd really like is, from my subscribers, is this something you can stomach? Is this something you can live with? Is this something that you're alright with? Or should I just call it quits? And also, do you think it's good for kids? Do you think they'll get value out of it? Etc. I'm going to try to make something I think kids will be reasonably entertained by. But that's going to take longer time, obviously. So this video release schedule is going to go way down from once a week to once a month if we're lucky. Maybe more, maybe less. We'll see. But it's also going to be a lot longer. It's going to be closer to 40 minutes instead of the 20-minute cap that I've been doing per vid. Again, I got to account for the loss of playlists somehow. So with that, am I doing good on time this time around? Yes, I am. Okay. So, please get ready for me as I try to put on my best kid-friendly face and see if we can't teach the kids a little something, huh? Here we go. Oh, hi. Didn't see you there. Well, since you're on the other side of the screen, how about I show you what I'm doing today? I've been working on this thing for a little while, so I've already got a little bit of it built. But this is a model of the HMS Dreadnought. Now, y'all are probably thinking, this is just a regular-looking battleship. Well, it was kind of the first regular battleship like this. It was a couple other revolutions it had. I know it had turbine engines, which way back when it was made were a pretty big deal. They're pretty revolutionary. I know the box says 1918, but the ship was actually started in 1906. 1918 is kind of when the boat, was done. So here it is. I can even show you a little bit more. Can I get this in greater relief? Is this camera going to be silly? Nah, I think we got it. So, as you can see, this boat's not quite fitting together normally. I've still got a lot of work to do. But that's not because it's, it's a complicated kit, but rather because I'm adding a little something. So I'm trying to make this boat with its insides. I'm doing this as practice for something bigger, which we'll get to on a later video, but for now it's a surprise. And for those who have been here a while, please don't spoil the surprise. But I am putting in the decks of this boat. And I'll just give you a quick tour. And then I'm going to show you in greater detail exactly how I did this. So here's the insides, and they stack into the boat. So some of these I won't have a lot of footage for you. But this one right here, I was able to do a lot with. So you'll be seeing a lot of this. But the way I built this is the same as how I built all of those. Seems I've mismixed the paint a little bit. That's okay. That's alright. I'll just remember for next time. So, this is what would have been the two boiler rooms and what's called a shell room, which is where they kept the big, scary shells that those guns on the battleship fire. Up next is this would have been the powder room, where they kept the powder that powered those big, scary cannons. After that, we have this, which has these. These four long rooms are the fan chambers, where it had some ventilation fans. Come on. Pink. There. That'll keep this focused. And this has a bunch of other rooms. Not only does it have bathrooms for the officers, it's also got some machinery rooms and other neat stuff. And I made it all fit into this boat. And I'll actually turn it this way. I even added something to represent some of the stuff at the very bottom that wasn't quite a floor in the boat, but was worth mentioning. And last but not least, that. So, how about I, if you're interested, show you how I got to this? Because all this took a long while. I'm going to do that with something called time-lapse so you don't have to sit through all of it. And meanwhile, while I'm going through that, if I find some interesting term, I'll see if I can't put some animation on some side of the screen or some picture or something to explain it to you better. Alright, with that, let's go ahead and I'll start the time-lapse and describe what I was doing. So the first thing you do is the model kit is you take a look at the inside of the box and you make sure everything looks like it's there. Now I'm looking at the hull piece because I need to make it look like the model that I'm going to build later. To do that, I need to make it out of one piece. And I need to make it look like it's got a hollow interior. So what I'm doing there is I was just using the tool called a Dremel, which your parents will have to use if you're too young. That's okay. And now I use those blue things to hold it together while I glued the two halves together so I could get them as closely fit to each other as possible. And now that they're really close together, I use that Dremel tool again to help me sand the inside, get it as smooth as possible on the plastic itself before using some putty to fill in any gaps. That I used my little air tool there, that was an airbrush, and I was just using that to spray any extra dust out of there. And I mix some water in there. It works like a pressure washer when you do it that way. It's a nice trick to have in your arsenal. Now I'm just looking at some of my parts and thinking of how to smooth it. And now I'm actually smoothing the interior with the putty that I mentioned. Now the next frame is I've done a bit of priming. It's a little later in the process. It took a lot to sand and prime this, by the way, because not only did I sand it just the one time, when I put on primer, it revealed to me things that I had missed that needed sanding and further smoothing or filling in, which is why I'm adding in this putty that you see here. This is a slightly different putty than the one I used previously. Now this tool is called a pin vise. What it lets me do is recreate some of the porthole details that I'd accidentally covered up, filled in, or destroyed with the sandpaper. And now here, is something a little bit more interesting than the sanding and the filling in. So you see that gray outline in the top left corner there? That represents the boat hull, and you'll notice it has a shape that's not really easy to measure or guess at. So what I do is I end up filling it with model clay, and that'll change in a sec to have a light gray filling. And what I do is I take that light gray filled in bit, I pop it out of the hull, and then wherever there's watertight bulkheads or something I want to get an outline, I just cut there and I use that piece to make my outline. Now, the thing that I learned as the little pictures up there disappear is that modeling clay is kind of sticky. And having it stick in the inside of my boat hull is not going to make that nice boat interior shape blob just pop out. And that's going to change the shape, that I get, and that's going to make my results less accurate than they could be. So what I'm doing here is I'm slipping in a little bit of aluminum foil, and I just put a few little daubs, actually the modeling clay and little points, just to give that aluminum foil somewhere to start to stick on the model, but not really stick very well. And then what I did is I started putting in first I got one good piece of aluminum foil in there, and then I put another, and I super glued aluminum foil pieces to each other. The idea being that I wouldn't super glue anything to the model itself because, well, that's going to defeat the whole purpose of having something to pop out of the model if you glue it in place. But by super gluing the aluminum to the aluminum, I ended up with kind of a skin into which I could then push the modeling clays. You see me doing little bits here and there. And then by doing that way, I was able to kind of build my boat interior as I went along. Now, I ended up doing this a couple of times with this method, and the reason that is because I tried a few ways to cut up my boat shape. First, I tried it by decks, and then I found that it was just too long and things were too flimsy and inaccurate for me to really work with. So then what I did, and you'll see it, is I went by where watertight bulkheads were in the boat. The idea of watertight bulkheads is if one part of the boat is damaged or compromised, then not all the boat is flooded, so the boat might still be able to float and make it back to safety. Now that we've gone over that little just fun fact, you can see me, I'm trimming off some of the edges of that aluminum interior skirt I made, and I'm also doing my best to really flatten that modeling clay into the boat so that it's pushing the boat hull outward a bit just to make sure that my deck piece will fit in nice. And I'm also making it as flat as I can so I get the best possible measurements out of this when I pull it out and use it for measuring. Now, you're going to see me play with my calipers, that's what's in my hand right there, and a piece of paper, and I think it's time I put some more pictures on the screen because I got a little thing I'm going to do that I want to explain to you, just to kind of explain the concept of scale in terms of if you see a scale on a plan. So you see the red line and the blue line and the green line. The green line is the one to which the blue line is a third and the red line is a fifth of it. So you're about to see it change. But I had to relate the red line to the blue line for my model to get how big the plan was versus how big my model was. Or rather, get measurements on the blue line to measurements in the red scale. So I found out that it's 3 of the blue line to the 1 green line, or 5 of the red line to the green line. So a red line is 3/5 of the blue line. Now you'll see me making a bunch of lines on this piece of paper out of these measurements after doing the math. And what I'm doing now is I'm actually cutting through my modeling clay boat to get the outline of this boat at the various places. Remember the picture I showed you previously? You're kind of seeing it right here. And I even go and later I make an additional cut to get an additional cross section. And you're about to see me make some use of these pieces. So here I try tracing out the outline. And about here I grow a brain. And I realize that I have a much faster and easier way to get my outlines. How? Well, you'll see me fiddle this a little bit. I can just wait for it to be a surprise, I guess. But I'll give you a hint. It has something to do with my airbrush. Because I put all my pieces on. And there we go. As you can see, I just covered it up and then I painted it over so that the outlines of the plans would appear as unpainted or the outline of my fake boat appears unpainted, and everything else I could cut away would appear red. That made it easy for me with the jeweler's coping saw I'm using there to cut out these outlines and cut them fairly accurately. There wasn't a lot of fiddling around that had to be done. Although I do want to get something special for using a jeweler's coping saw, but that's later when I'm working on the bigger boat or when I'm doing other sections possibly of this boat. So, as you can see, I'm cutting through this fairly easily. The jeweler's coping saw is meant to cut metal, thin metal sheets used for making jewelry. I think it's called fretwork in the trade, but I'm not sure. I could be wrong. And there I am. First I cut a big bit of it out, and then I try to cut really close to the unpainted outline that was made when I tried to paint everything, but because my plastic was being covered by sections of the boat hull, it left bits of it that were unpainted for me to cut out. And this cutting is going to take a while, so I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of editing so we don't have to sit through all of it. Boom! There we are. So as you can see, I've put my bulkheads into my boat. Now I'm calling them bulkheads after the watertight bulkheads I mentioned earlier that were on the real boat. You'll see I'm using super glue, even though these sheets are actually made of plastic, and the solvent glue would work. But because I've already put primer and putty on, I have to use super glue because that's what's going to bond to the primer and the putty. Now I'm working out my model. I think I'm just fiddling around with it a little bit. And this I might prime it after cleaning out the insides because super glue does leave a bit of a mess sometimes when you put a lot of it down. So there we go, and now I'm just fiddling with it, cleaning it out, doing a bit of sanding, and I did that to even out the inside of it as much as possible to the rest of it. And now I disassemble at lightning speed. And as you can see, I put down more tape this time to protect details, and then I just put in more applications of putty as needed. Now, this is kind of special. So, as I said, I wanted to put little sections with floors, and this is one of those floors. Now, I have several that I showed you at the beginning of the video, and this is a pretty good explanation of how I made it. So, all those walls I made with styrene strip, and the bottom is styrene sheet. And I used that solvent glue that melts the two pieces together so they act like one piece to make the body of this and make all the walls and stuff, so because the strip can be easily cut and easily bent. And I had a strip that was just about the perfect size. So while I will have to do it in the near future a bit of adjusting to make everything fit in the decks, and I might take a slightly different approach in the future, as you can see, it makes a very good set of rooms. Now, about those little tiny shiny things that I'm playing with the tweezers and then trying to fiddle in place, this is called photo etch. Now, I've got myself a kit that actually lets me do my own photo etching, and I think this is a prime opportunity to just go ahead and explain that process to you with a couple of more of my silly little pictures. So, photo etching uses something called a photoresist, which is a special kind of chemical film that will react to UV light to change and be strong against a fluid called an etchant. So you put a photo on your photo etch, and then that is how you tell your photo etch where to and where not to cure. Kind of like what I have here, where the blue is the photo etch and the brown, it represents my brass. And I want to leave the middle piece of brass. I want to etch out the rest of that. Now something's going to be doing the etching. Well, the etchant in this case is usually some strong, scary chemical that you don't want to touch. In my case, for my kit, it's called ferric chloride. And as you can see, the third thing you do after you shine the UV light through your kind of picture onto your photoresist, you get this kind of thing going on when you put it into the bath, where some of the photoresist remains and some of it doesn't. And because there's places that are and aren't exposed to the etchant, some of the brass is just eroded away by the ferric chloride. And that's the kind of process that you can see in the opposite corner of my screen made that little brown piece that I keep cutting or brass piece, I should say, that I keep cutting the little bits of photo etch out, and I fold it to make various little details. Now, isn't that something? Now that we're back out of that and the silly little pictures are gone, you can see I'm just cutting out pieces of the photo etch to fold into little shapes. That's one of the things you can design into the photo etch. Since you're able to etch from both sides of the sheet, you can actually do tricks so you only etch halfway, and that is just the folding. Now what am I doing here? As you can see, I'm covering my part with a yellow tape and holding it down, but I cut some of it so it's uncovered. Well, just like how the photoresist protects your various pieces of your part from being etched, that tape, called masking tape, acts as something called a mask for your paint that keeps your airbrush paint from getting to certain places on your model. That lets you paint large amounts of the model very quickly and very evenly. That's actually the real benefit of an airbrush, is that it doesn't leave those brush strokes like a regular paintbrush will. Now, the way you get around the paintbrush brush strokes is to very heavily thin your paint, because then any brush strokes are going to be invisible and you're going to apply so many layers that it's going to go on very evenly. That's also part of the reason why you want to use primer. And speaking of the fun things about paint, you'll see that I'm mixing it in my airbrush, and you'll see that yellow glue bottle that I have, or I used to label as yellow and blue. That's a leveling thinner. It's a special kind of thinner that thins out the paint, but lets it dry slower so that it'll go on smoother. Now, as you can see, I'm doing some final areas of the part where I'm cutting out the rooms that I don't want some of the other colors. And I'm just using my scalpel, which is very, very sharp. And you don't want to use one of those unless your parents say it's okay, or if you're old enough to not cut yourself to ribbons with these things. Doctors use these for a reason. They're very sharp. So yeah, there I go, and I pick out the bits of my mask for my the last part. And then I mix a light green paint, because I actually did a bit of Google searching to try and find out what ships looked like in this time period. And this is the color I was able to kind of guess at, because it was used on Japanese ships, and Japanese ships were being built by the Brits at that time. Okay, so that's another time-lapse section. So hopefully this all looks nice and pretty when I open it up. Oh, I think I did a good job here. All right, I now have a good base to paint from, which is very important. So, as you can see, I painted these coal bunker places and these barbette areas a darker silver color. I did that because you really wouldn't see paint inside a coal bunker because, well, the coal would wear it all away. And as for the barbette, well, the paint might get into, the oil and stuff and make it kind of, just add a little too much wear for the liking of most people to the mechanism. Huh, alright. Neat. A little piece must have fallen in there. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start painting things up to look like they're various things that I want them to. And I'm going to do that with a regular brush. Only there is one little special thing about this brush. The brushes I use are very, very small. Not sure if you can see that there. Because I use small brushes, I'm able to get all these fine details. And as for the paints I'm using today, I'll use a light color or a darker color. I guess I can use a mix of them, can't I? Here, this will actually, that's useful. Okay, so this is one, this is the other, and alright. Now I'm just looking to see what's where, so I get the best possible results. Alright, let's use this, and then if that doesn't work. Okay, so there's that. And then I think we'll do that. Alright, and I'll see if I can't make the guy behind this lamp desk look like an officer, because he'd be really important. Because he'd be the one in charge of the lamps. As I mentioned, you want to be careful who gets a lamp on a boat. Wouldn't want someone dropping it. Okay, so there's that, there's that. I'll leave that over there. Alrighty, and now I need one more. There's what I need. Water. Okay. Here we go. So first, why not paint the officer first? Okay. So before I go completely into time-lapse mode, so I try to also have about a 50-50 mixture of whatever I'm thinning my paint with to, you know, the paint itself. Even for normal brushing. Sometimes I do a little thinner or a little thicker, but that's where I tend to start. I've just found this by trying it, really, and making it work. When I do that, I find I get some pretty good results. In this way, hope with a little luck and some skill, I'm able to paint an officer at 1/700th scale. I had to look this up online too. They actually, the officers, if I remember correctly from that website, wore black coats and black uniforms and sometimes had white trim. The enlisted people had they didn't wear the white, they have the white trim, they just wore blue. And anybody else wants to be an officer? Why don't we make him an officer, huh? Let's make him an officer, because he's looking at the machines. That's what he's doing. So we'll make him an officer. So I'm just trying to very carefully control where the paint goes. The paint I keep rather thin, and for a smaller brush, I do end up making it a little thinner than my normal 50-50 mix. The reason I do that is so it flows off of the brush a little better. So that's what I find. So let's see. Anything else I can paint black? Nah. Alright. So next, let's paint some of the wood stuff, huh? That's what this brown is for. Actually, I might want to make that a time lapse. How long has this been? Because if it's been too long, I can always time lapse it. Actually, with the beauty of video editing software, I can time-lapse it anywhere I want. It just takes a little more effort for me to time-lapse it out of a single clip. But, you know what? If we're going to do this film, we should do it right and always try to put in the good and reasonable effort to make things right. I know, I sound preachy, but, well, at least it's not preaching to eat your vegetables or, I don't know, something else that kids these days are. We were different back in your age, kids, so I'm not gonna lie, my jokes and my humor may not jive with your jokes and humor today, but you know what, that's okay, because while there's a lot of ways we are in fact different, there's a few ways in which we're the same. If you're still watching at this point, you seem to have an interest in people making models, which is perfectly cool with me. I like making models too. And I also like watching people make models. So now I'm taking this thin brush and I'm just running along the tops, trying to control as best I can where the paint goes. And with that bit of me going slow, I'll start going fast again with time-lapse just to save us some time. So you've seen, I'm sure, you'll probably noticed, you may even decide to go and try to count how much of this movie was time-lapse and how much of it was done at real speed. Well, I'll save you a bit of trouble in trying to guess how long I took to make this model, because as you can see, this is only one of the floors that I've got in one section of the boat, and I've actually had to make, 5 of these now? Or 4 or 5 of them? And yeah, it's been over 2 months that has taken even for me to get to this point. And I've still got some ways to go, but this will let me get really, really good for that boat that I plan on building in the future, which is even bigger, and it's, well, it'll be even more detailed, because since it's bigger, I can actually build smaller details into it than I can with the Dreadnought, in terms of what's actually there. For instance, for the Dreadnought, I can really only build in desks and chairs, but for what's coming up, it'll be in a scale where typewriters and other things might be an option. And with that, I'm going to go out of kid speak and get back into adult speak for just a moment. So guys, I wanted to get this out a little faster, so I'm not going to add much more to it. As you can see, this is serving as kind of both a clip show and a kind of new way forward video. So I really do want your input on this. Again, this is a big change for me. I'm not used to making content for kids, and I'm sure that there's ways that I could do a lot better, but, well, you never know if you don't try, and I'd like to at least try and keep this channel going. And, well, if I'm going to have to hamstring it to avoid legal risk, because YouTube doesn't want to offer this kind of third option of its general audiences, or do things that are more creator friendly because, well, companies are greedy, I guess. I have no idea. Well, that's really all there is to it. Now, this again is me doing a lot of painting by hand, and then I'm just mixing some ballast with some black paint, and that's how I made the coal, and then I will black paint it later. But I'm just going to end this video with yeah, what do you think? Is this a good way going forward? Do these videos work, and can you stomach them? Please comment on this video, because I think I've made it clearly enough for adults to cover me a little bit. And until next time, peace out.